Welcome to the Slingshot Group podcast. I'm your host, Tim Foote, CEO of Slingshot Group, where we build remarkable teams through staffing and coaching. And today I'm joined by Kadi Cole. And Kadi, I'm excited about this for a number of reasons. Firstly, we get to do this the old-fashioned way.
I know, in real life. What a treat.
In person, not on our streaming service or whatever it is. We are here in person. Secondly, you are the first guest on the Slingshot Group podcast who's here for a second time, which is great.
I am so honored.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And so you need to go back and watch the first episode we did with Kadi because she shares about her story and her work and all of that, and it's fantastic. And thirdly, Kadi, I always learn so much from you.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for being with us today. And Kadi, every organization wants top talent on their team, right? And few feel like they have it. And that's a huge part of the role we play at Slingshot Group is finding and hiring top leaders. And there's no doubt talent is out there. It's all about attracting and retaining top leaders. So what are top organizations doing right now that you see to attract top talent to their teams?
Well, I think the first thing that's important to know is that everyone is really struggling with this right now. I think what we've seen in our market, the workforce sort of shifts that we've had have really changed what it's like to recruit talent and especially to retain high quality talent. And so if people are struggling with that, I think it's just important to know it's not just you. Our culture has shifted dramatically around how we think about work, our expectations for work, what we want for kind of our whole life. And so that is really playing into what's working for organizations and businesses and nonprofits in terms of recruitment. So I would say some of the trends that I see is really shifting away from this idea that we're the ones with the control and everyone should want to work for us. We really kind of have to beat the pavement and become a place that recruits people well to our organization. So a lot of things have changed around like wellness programs. Many employees are looking for what are the benefits I have? What does my whole life look like if I work here? How are you supporting mental health? How's diversity working in your culture? There's a whole lot of things that people are looking for now that they weren't looking for 5 years ago. And so top organizations are up front with that. A lot of times people have great information, they're just not leading with it. And I think people are really looking for that. Secondly, pay and benefits always comes down to that. But I think people are less willing to sacrifice for really low incomes in the hopes of a passion area. Obviously, when people go to work, they want to work for an area they're passionate about. That's a huge piece of what employees are looking for, but they don't want that to necessarily mean they have to eat peanut butter and jelly for the rest of their life. They're looking for a win-win. And again, I think as organizations, we can be better at that, but we have to be forward in talking about what that looks like, what advancement looks like, what long-term careers can look like.
Why do you think, Kadi, that priorities are shifting like this?
Well,
And so quickly?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the pandemic, even though I know we're tired of talking about it, it did just shift culturally everyone's view around what a quality life looks like. And I think having hybrid opportunities is a huge plus for many people. They're wanting to work at different hours. They're wanting to be able to kind of set their pace. They want to be more connected with their kids. They want to be able to live in multiple places. They want to travel while they work. And so if you have those opportunities to really leverage them, and people are looking for jobs that work for their life rather than finding a job and creating a life around it. So the whole kind of center of why I go to work has changed.
It's interesting, Kadi. We often have to coach the organizations we're working with that the candidate is now interviewing you.
Yes.
And it didn't used to be that way. And there used to be a whole slate of candidates you could be looking at. But now to get the top leaders, you have to realize that they're interviewing you. And I think part of the shift too is generational. Am I allowed to say that we're both Gen Xers?
Oh, yes. I'm a true diehard Gen Xer.
Me too.
Yes.
And we know how to code switch, right? We can switch boomer, we can switch millennial. And you and I remember when it was all about how do you work with millennials? How do you come along with millennials? How do you make millennials effective? Well, now we're talking Gen Z.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I am pumped about this next generation of leaders. What are you seeing in this next generation of leaders that we need to be looking out for, but also that excites you?
Well, I think we are about to see a really big revolution in our workforce with Gen Z. I'm very
Mm,
excited about it, partly because they've grown up in really unique circumstances. So their agility, their capacity for innovation, their hunger to create in their work is so much bigger than we've seen before. And we are all leading organizations that need to be more nimble. We need to be more agile. We need to create innovation in order to stay afloat. They're the ones who are going to have the answers for us. So I think embracing that is really important. However, I do think our idea of generational mindset needs to shift a little bit.
mm,
I see more, I would say it's less generational and more cultural mindset oriented. There are some Gen Z people who think a lot more like boomers than they do 20-year-olds. And there are some 35-year-olds who think more like a 20-year-old than they should their own age. And so part of what we have to do, because you're right, we've shifted from this market where the organizations are in control of the workforce to the workers are now the ones leading it.
mm.
Kind of like the housing market changed from
Right.
buyer to seller market. And so we have to do a better job recruiting to the mindset, the younger, more agile, more digitally informed mindset. So part of it is we have to make sure that we're talking about our organizations online. Most people are looking for jobs online way
Mm.
before they ever apply for the job. So how do you
And
look
looking at
on
reviews.
yeah, how do you look on
Yeah.
Glassdoor? What does Yelp say about you? What are your
Mm.
Google reviews? People are looking at that and opting out of organization, even applying for an organization because of what's on there. They want to be a part of an organization that's not just winning like from budget or mission. They want one that's winning in terms of people and caring for people and relationships and an authentic culture.
Mm.
And that is a greater value for this next generation. And it's also what they bring to their work, which is pretty exciting.
You touched on something that I've heard before, so I want to dig back into that. You said Generation Z, some of them are more like boomers. Talk more about that and why you think that's the case.
Well, I think Gen Z is sort of rebounding a little off of millennials. When we were working with millennials, especially when they were in their young 20s, it was they had a lot of head knowledge. They're the first digital natives. They grew up in the information age. So they could talk big about leadership,
Mm,
but most of them had not done it a lot. And so they came in big and bold and confident. And then we're sort of like, why aren't you showing up to meetings on time? Like, how
mm,
am I having to educate you on this? Gen Z is different. They are well aware that they don't know what they're doing. And they also are growing up in the middle of a huge mental health crisis. And almost everyone is struggling with being overwhelmed, stress, and anxiety. They're very interested in managing that for themselves. And that's where it feels like a boomer. They're saying, tell me exactly the job I'm going to do.
mm.
What exactly are your expectations? And they're going to self measure because their self awareness is really incredible. I'm going to self measure if I can deliver on your expectations. And if I can't, I'm not going to take the job. A good old
Mm.
millennial or a Gen Xer, we're going to say yes no matter what. I'm like, I have no idea how to do that job, but I'm going to say yes. A Gen Z is going to be much more measured in how they go into that. Structure, consistency is how you minimize stress and anxiety. They
Mm.
need more from us on that end.
That's a really good way to sum up how you prepare for an interview with a Gen Z leader
Mhm.
is to be answering those questions. That's really helpful. So it's one thing to get a talented leader in the door, Gen Z or millennial. It's another to retain them. And of course, working with lots of churches and nonprofits, ministry organizations on roles that they're hiring, we're seeing national averages of people staying that are starting to shrink, like 12 months, 16 months, 2 years on average, which is less. Millennials and Gen Z leaders are changing roles far more frequently than the older generations. How can we as leaders create an environment where the talented leaders we bring in actually stick around and stay?
Right. Well, it's competitive. They're
Mm,
getting wooed and recruited to other places with more pay and better benefits and more lifestyle wholeness. And so they're taking advantage of that. We grew up in an era where we didn't get to just change jobs. And we're like, if you don't stay 3 years, they don't even want to interview you on their resume.
right.
And millennials and Gen Z are being recruited away. And so we do have to have really clear pathways of advancement. That would be one thing that we can really do to work with younger generations. How am I going to progress? But then also really tapping into their inner entrepreneur entrepreneur or their inner creative spirit. This generation has been making their own podcasts. My son was in the 5th grade when he started making his own podcast. They've been online. They create pictures. They are creators. They want to be a part of creating things. And they're very entrepreneurial. Half the kids I know have nonprofits that they've started. They're making no money, but they're still doing
Right.
it. And so I like to really encourage leaders to think more in terms of educating young leaders on what it means to be an intrapreneur, not just an entrepreneur. You can actually create in our organization. What if you could take all of your best ideas and bring them into this team and this organization with people who know you and love you and believe in you? And you get to bring all of these ideas and grow them over time in a community. There really probably isn't a Gen Z kid who wouldn't want to hear that. We rarely talk about that. We talk about deliver on your job. We talk about we're moving pieces. We'll let you know what will happen. Stay here. You need to pay your dues. We're giving the opposite message. This generation wants to create the future with us. They don't need to write the vision. They want to help create the strategy for it. If we include them in that, they will stay for much longer.
Oh gosh, an entrepreneur, not an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That's really insightful. I haven't thought about
And
that before.
we have to create our organizations to allow for that. It's
Yes.
not just about developmental steps. I'm going to move you over here, and then you're going to lead a group that's bigger over here, and then you're going to run to that campus or to this team. It's how do I actually hold you in a team and let you create and innovate in the space you get to lock into with relationships.
And so many older leaders, Katie, are threatened by
Yes.
all of those ideas and all that creativity. Speak to those leaders.
Oh gosh. Well, I do think there is a need to harness all of that energy, but the first part is to actually listen to ideas. Most kids, most young adults aren't looking to have. They know they don't have the answers, but they do want to be listened to. And you're talking about a generation that grew up without stable homes. They got taken out of school for 2 years.
Yeah.
They lived, their developmental years were very fractured. Their only commodity for that was to have ideas and to create and connect with people around this. If we can embrace the conversation, we actually can harness that into things that might actually do something. I encourage every leader to spend at least some of their time in like R&D mentality and every employee being able to do it. Even if it's 5% of your time, you get to just create new ideas, or we're going to talk about things totally off the wall. All of that is not only just for an idea, it's also to create engagement with your employees.
Yeah. So start by listening, and that will encourage your entrepreneurs. Here's another thing too, Katie, I'd love your thoughts on. It's been common practice in hiring to look at somebody's resume, and if they've moved around a lot, like every 2 years, that's a real big red flag. Not the case anymore?
No, not the case at all. I think most young leaders are using their 20s as an internship because we've not done a great job in our school systems or colleges actually preparing people for a job they want to do. They're a little unclear. They don't have a lot of experience. They haven't tested things. Most people in their young 20s have not had a part-time job or 6 part-time jobs like you should in high school. And so they're using their early 20s to experiment.
Right.
And I would say when I'm looking to hire someone, I'm actually looking for someone who's had a few experiences because they're coming in with self-awareness to say, I like doing this. I'm passionate about this. These things don't work for me.
Yeah.
And as long as we can have an honest conversation about that, we can decide if we're a good fit or not a good fit.
Right. So this is a whole mindset change
Yes.
as you evaluate resumes, which is a big thing, a really big thing. What are some other opportunities we might be missing right now, Katie, as we build out teams? Are there things that you see, common things that organizations are overlooking?
Yes. Well, I think young leaders, we all kind of look towards that. I think what we're missing are older leaders. So right now, the women over 55 who are kind of in empty nest season, it's our first generation of fully educated women, mostly college grad prepared, if not further. They have 20 years experience navigating work and home life, and they now have empty nests and they're ready to do something. And the workforce is probably going to be 15% women over 55 in the next 5 to 10 years. It is a huge pool of talent and experience and maturity and wisdom that if we do not access it properly, we're going to lose it to other places. And so churches and nonprofits particularly have not done a great job accessing this. And so I just want to really encourage people, if you know people or if you have jobs open, even connecting intergenerational teams. You might have 5 new employees over the next couple years, what if 50% were Gen Z and 50% were women over 50? What you might be able to get by cross-pollinating and creating an intergenerational team. The research on that is exponential, the
Mm.
return on that kind of investment.
Well, and the work, Katie, you do in helping organizations prepare for that and be ready for that is so important because so many organizations think they are and they're not.
Yes.
I think that's really helpful. Katie, we often will work with organizations who give us their wish list for their ideal leader or candidate. And you can imagine all kinds of things are on that wish list, and it's just not out there. I mean, Jesus wouldn't be good enough for the job, and they probably wouldn't hire him.
No, he's
And
always late. I mean, for heaven's sakes.
or off praying.
Yes.
But yeah, they have a long list of competencies they want, and what we love to do is finding out what is actually out there, and
Yeah.
and when the goal and the mission of the leader matches the goals and the mission of the organization, and seeing that match up. We always say that personalities drive searches for leaders. So once you start connecting with personalities, it will drive how the job molds and shapes.
Mm.
But we're seeing more and more that often leaders are needing to be hired, and we've touched on this with the Gen Z workforce, that need development, that
Mhm.
want development, that need coaching. Talk about the importance and role of coaching for all of us
Mm.
as leaders, but also in the hiring process now.
Yeah. Well, I think coaching is the way of the future. I mean,
Mm.
it's why we both invest in it so
Mhm.
much and spend so much time doing it. And a lot of that is because our cultures have changed. Again, we're including people into our work populations that haven't had full stable families or intergenerations speaking into them. So they're
Mm.
coming in less prepared. And coaching is that very specific kind of mentoring with a kick in the pants
Yeah.
to move you forward. And so, we really don't look at athletes and think you should be able to play star basketball without having a coach. We don't look at high performance business leaders. And really, we're finding that every person can really succeed from that. And most of our team leaders don't have time to do the kind of coaching that people require. And so, supplementing with hired coaches, especially people outside your organization that can give biased opinions and challenges and resources really seem to catapult people forward.
Mm. So, Katie, you're talking to a leader who has another leader on their team that is crushing it right now, doing a great job. Why do they need coaching?
Oh, you always want to invest in people who are moving forward, right? It's actually how you retain top talent.
Right.
Most people will stay in a job for a lot of and overcome a lot of challenges if they feel like they're growing as a person and they're being invested in. Most of us, again, don't have time to do that, but giving that person fuel and adding it and accelerating them even further is a great way to do it. Actually, coaching underperformers, we can try to turn people around, but we have the most success when we coach high performers.
Mm. Tell me a couple of stories. I mean,
Mm.
obviously, take the names out, but what have you seen when you've been coaching a high performer that's happened and developed?
Sure. Well, I can think of a couple in particular. So I'm coaching right now a high level leader who came in as a succession, right? The founding pastor is gone. He's coming in and taking over as a senior leader. And he knows what he's doing, but he moved from one size of an organization to about twice the size.
Mhm.
So he has the raw materials, but he's not ever led something at this size. And he's leading a team that grew up with the organization. And so just being able to have a sounding board, I think, being able to map some things out. I've led at organizations bigger than his, so I know the ropes a little bit and can be like, actually, the way you want to form that leadership team is this. Oh, great idea on that staff retreat, but you might want to just keep in mind the history that this team has together. And so you're going to want to start with some teaching about this topic before you break into that activity.
Mhm.
It's that wisdom and mentorship that comes when you haven't done something before. But he's doing a fantastic job, and he would have done a great job without coaching, but it just accelerates the ability to move things forward. I also coach a lot of women or racial minorities who step into a team that are maybe the first person like them on the team. And coaching is particularly important for that because it can feel very lonely.
Mm.
And when you find yourself in a space where you are unlike everyone else, our tendency is to question ourselves.
Mm.
That didn't go well. What am I missing?
Mm.
This didn't go right. How could I have done that better? And that's part of it. But the other piece of it is you need someone with outside perspective to say, actually, that had nothing to do with you.
Mm.
That was about them. And so you need to keep doing what you're doing. Don't fix what isn't broken. Instead, we're going to talk about how you actually stand up and let your voice be heard, even against resistance.
Gosh, that's powerful work, Katie. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Mm.
So, you've talked about great ways to attract and retain top leaders. As we close out, give me a top thing that organizations can do today in both those areas. Top thing they could do today, or question, if you want, that they could be asking today when it comes to attracting top leaders. What would that
Mhm.
be?
When it comes to attracting top leaders, I think the number one thing is to look at your digital footprint and make sure that what is actually online is matching who you are.
Mm,
Right now, we're advertising something that isn't true, and we are not reflecting the heart of our organizations, the mission, and how much we believe in the people who work for us enough.
excellent. And the top things organizations can do today to retain great leaders.
Oh, I love this question. I think the number one most powerful thing is when you are doing whatever your next evaluation is, which, could be every week or once a year, and hopefully you're doing evaluations. But the number one question is, what is it that I can do to help you become more of who God made you to be in this place? It is a selfless question. It's a generous question. It puts the employee at the center of the developmental conversation. Instead of you're here to serve me or our mission, we're actually also here to serve you and the calling that God's put on your life. And when we have a win-win, that's how we retain great talent.
Great. So, Katie, you hit on this a moment ago, and that is the topic of mental health. And it is such a prevalent issue for leaders and teams right now. And so many leaders don't know what to do, don't know how to
Yeah.
talk about it or tackle it. Can you give us some practical advice today?
Mhm. Yeah, it is a really big issue, and everyone's struggling with it somehow. If it's not them, it's their spouse or their kids or their aging parents or people on their team. So I think it's important. The first thing is that we acknowledge it. And so even if you just talk about it in a meeting or send a memo out that says, hey, we know everyone's feeling this. We want to support you. We're trying to figure it out. Just helps give people vocabulary. And I think for most leaders, we also have to really assess our own mental health. Am I giving myself the resources I need? Is my life balance and pace sustainable? Am I high anxiety and making decisions out of fear and pressure? Or am I really taking time to think things through? Am I able to be present and quiet with other people? We have to look at those things ourselves. And every therapist, I always say, well, you need two people. You need a great coach and you need a great
Mm,
therapist. And you don't have to be in both all the time, but there's a place for each one of them. Coaches tend to move you forward. Therapists tend to help you look back and have more presence now. And so both are important. So some concrete things that people do, and I do think this is a great recruitment strategy, is are we offering mental health services in our insurance package? And do we cover people's families? Because most of the leaders I find are not crippled by mental health themselves as much as they're crippled by the mental health crisis in their family. And so when we can extend those benefits to be able to include kids and spouses, we really increase the longevity of staff on our team. The second thing is to be able to really talk about boundaries at work and create cultures where when people are navigating something or they just want to prevent a crisis or prevent burnout, we are giving freedom to be able to say, I need to leave the office by this time, or
mm,
I don't take calls past 10 o'clock, which shouldn't seem like that's a necessary boundary, but people have to say those
mm.
things sometimes. We live in such a 24/7 access world, and particularly in the nonprofit space where we're serving clienteles that usually aren't always just on the clock, it's easy to feel like you're burning and cranking all the time. And so giving one another freedom as leaders, practicing those boundaries, scheduling emails to go out at 9 o'clock the next morning instead of at midnight when you're actually sending them. If it's working for you at midnight, great, but we don't have to communicate to our teams that we expect them to be on at midnight.
Mm.
So those kind of practices that create a culture that says we're actually looking for a win-win. I believe that when you are at your healthiest, you're going to be contributing the most. And when your mental health is struggling, even if you're just tired and fatigued, you're overly stressed out, you've been working too hard without a day off, we don't make great decisions. It takes us twice as long to do anything. It's better to kind of cut it off, take the rest we need, and then come back strong. We have to lead that because we're leading a culture that has not learned those practices.
Mm.
So it starts with ourselves. We have to talk about it, and then we have to implement cultures and policies that support it.
Yeah. And we got to remember as leaders, Katie, that we're stewarding our team. And, to
Mm.
steward means to manage or care for people that are in our care. So
Yeah.
often we walk into organizations and they ask us for painkillers. What they really need is vitamins.
Mm,
And the vitamins is the therapy and the coaching and engaging that before we need it.
yeah.
I mean, engaging therapy before we hit the brick wall. I mean,
Yes.
it's far better that we get ahead of that. So that's really helpful advice. As we close out, Katie, some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What are you reading right now that is really helpful for developing you in leadership?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm reading a book right now called 10X is Easier Than 2X. I'm on my second time through. Have you read that book?
I haven't read it, but
It's
you're about the third person that
it's
suggested it.
really good. I'm finding it very personally challenging for me and my leadership and the clients I work with. It's been great.
What's your favorite part of the work you do right now?
Oh, coaching, hands down.
Mm.
I love helping people navigate their own unique situations and customizing an approach that's going to be a win-win for them and their organization.
Mm. What's the most exciting thing you're seeing in kingdom work and leadership right now?
Oh, I think we are in a midst of reinventing what it means to have faith in our world today,
Mm.
and this next generation is innovating that in really powerful ways. So the resurgence of spiritual activity among young adults is incredibly encouraging to me.
Mm. Most concerning thing.
I think we're losing our older generation before we harness the role of elder in our families and in our organizations and churches and
Mm.
communities.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Apart from your podcast and our podcast, what's the podcast everybody should be watching or listening to?
Oh, I'm a huge Carey Nieuwhof fan. I think if you're looking for leadership space, I would definitely be watching him. And then I follow comedians now because I just find there is something about a podcast that's making me laugh that is really good for my personal view of the world and not taking things quite so seriously.
Again, Katie, I personally always learn so much when we have conversations, and I'm looking forward to many more. I really appreciate the partnership we have in advancing women leaders
Mhm.
in the workforce, but also just in advancing kingdom work
That's right.
and healthy teams.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm sure there is something in this that you can share with another leader or subscribe. And until next time, stay curious and reach for the remarkable.